5 years. Um, yeah, so I've done basically a lot of the project management for a previous Reach hub that's located in Seattle, and I've been working with the Rocky Mountain team to get themselves set up. So I'm happy to work with anybody, help with any of the documentation, such as this lovely Gantt chart, which is a really useful tool for not just setting up what a project you'd like to be doing is and the activities that you're putting together, but also setting up a clear, quantifiable milestone and set up work for the activities. So yeah, I'm happy to meet everybody.
Yeah, and maybe if everyone else could just share your name, institution, and just your technology type, that would be really great for us to get started with. So we'll start with Cindy, since she's at the top of my Zoom screen.
Sure. So I'm working with Dr. Januki, Matt, who's also on this call, and we are working on a virtual intervention for men to reduce risk of suicide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so, Matt, I guess you're on the project, but you feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Matt Januki. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm going to keep my screen off. Kids running around and things like that over here. But yeah, working with Cindy on a virtual intervention, we're hoping has some upstream impact on suicide risk for men.
Thanks so much. And here's Teddy. But while he's logging in, hi, Teddy. Sorry about the confusion with the link. We're just having our innovators kind of introduce themselves. So I will let Juliet go next.
Hi, I'm Juliet Tinker from Boise State, and Noah, Souza, and I are working on an oral vaccine for salmonella.
Thanks so much, Juliet. And Noah, if you'd have anything else, but otherwise I see that you're eating your lunch, so no problem. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Gomelski. I'm a co-founder of a company named Maypel in Wyoming. And we're trying to develop oral products, primarily a mouth rinse for young kids based on natural products. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Thomas at the University of Wyoming, and I'm working with some collaborators at a couple other universities working on a virtual diabetes prevention program for use in rural areas.
Thanks, Jennifer. And last, Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Andy Wilson. I'm kind of representing Jenny Alderton, who's at Boise State. And the project is using AI to predict pressure injuries in surgical ICUs and then develop a really friendly dashboard for nurses to use.
Great, thanks. And I'll let Teddy introduce himself as well. Thanks for joining, Teddy.
Yeah, and sorry about that. I was like hunting around for links. Anyway, Teddy Johnson, I'm the Director of Technology Development at ITHS. And I worked in industry for 25 years making medical products, primarily devices, all sorts, all over the body, doing a lot of clinical work, and commercialization is what I help groups with now. And so my primary role is to help people figure out how to, take their research and turn it into a product, and from a product into a company.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we say this every session, like they're going to be informal. This one really is. I don't have formal slides. I just thought what would be helpful is to really like talk through this Gantt chart that we're asking you to complete. And this chart was like really developed actually by Teddy and Matthew and their experience and adapted by us. So you have the two people here with a lot of experience with it. So I'm going to kind of just walk through it and then defer to them to get kind of some examples and expertise on these specific sections. But in short, you have this Gantt chart and we're asking you to complete it. And what we want you to think about when you look at this Excel template is, how are you going to take your technology from where it is now and get it to the market. And conceptually, that's broken down in this chart into about 3 phases. And I'm just gonna lift a line from Teddy. Will you always have 3 stages? No. Will those stages overlap? Yes. But generally and conceptually, we found these 3 stages align with this goal. We also understand that 50K of funding, or even 100K, if you receive the next tranche of funding, may not and likely isn't enough to help you form a startup and get you to market. But the point of this work plan is so that you have a tool in your hand from the very beginning, that you can come back to and utilize throughout the life cycle of your technology, even beyond REACH, so that you can go to investors and really leverage use it to leverage spin out licensing and later stage development. But for most of you, your technologies are going to be sitting kind of in section A of this Gantt chart or section B. And that may be all you complete for this application, is just these first 2 here. If that makes sense. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. So we'll kind of just start with this first section here, section A. And the point of section A, this milestone, is to demonstrate proof of market opportunity, IP, and regulatory plan validity. So in general, what we're hoping you're thinking about in this section is there a market for this technology? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge market, but is there a market for this technology, and how do we figure out what that market is? So it isn't just I don't know, like, you can have a great idea. Like, what I tend to do in my background is, like, I have a great idea. Academia is a lot about publishing your ideas, but this is really thinking about, you have this great idea, you have this technology, and you're trying to demonstrate that it's not just a technology, but a technology that consumers want or need. Matthew and Teddy, do you want to add on to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I can. And I like to simplify things too, because quite often I'm teaching people of really diverse backgrounds. So just taking all the language away from it, this first section is, should you really be doing this? Like, really, really? And in my mind, I really try to I was an engineer first, right? So I love to invent things, and anything I invent is the coolest thing in the world, and I love it, and I don't want to give it up, right? So what I think about when I think about real products, versus like the engineer loves it, is really what I'll say is it art or is it a product, right? Like, so art can be beautiful. It's inspired by the creator, and there's at least one person in the world who's going to love it, right? You could sell at least one, but you may sell only one. And this first phase is to help you discern something like that from, there's a real need, and there's a lot of people out there who could really use this thing. They want this thing. They can't, if it's in medicine, they really can't treat patients well without this thing. And how many patients are there, right? Is there one patient that you're designing this for, or is it like every patient who comes in the door needs this thing or would benefit from this thing? And so when you think about market opportunity, I really encourage you to think about it that way. And, there's patent protection, which really is to say, if you do this thing, is it something anybody else could do just as easily? And the just as easily part can mean just as easily because it's so easy to figure out. They can just copy you, and whoever's faster is better. Or can you have some protection? Is there something that's novel about what you're doing that you can patent so that you can put up a wall and say, hey, you're not allowed to use that feature, or you're not allowed to do it in this way or that way, because that's what I'm doing. Is there something that's unique about what you have, that you can use to protect your idea and give you a head start? Really, that's all that patent law is for, encouraging innovators by giving them a head start in the marketplace, which they get by having that protection. And then, of course, we can get into regulatory and that sort of thing. But the first bit is really like, is it cool for you or is it cool for everybody? Is kind of the way I encourage people to think about it. I don't know if there's any questions, or Matthew, if you want to add anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would also say is that, there's certain sets of like thoughts that go into this template. So one of them was just, these are the kind of things you need to be thinking about because this isn't just a research project anymore. This is something that you're planning on commercializing. So, not just do you like it, but are other people going to use it, which we're seeing captured here. But, what activities do you really want to accomplish? What is needed in order to reach a milestone? What exactly are possible milestones that you would have? So one of the ways that we've at least done this and we reach is teams could usually have between 1 to 3 milestones, and some of the language that we're providing, so proof of market opportunity, IP, or demonstrating proof of product concept, we didn't necessarily think of it as your first milestone has to be like IP or has to be regulatory, and your second one has to be a proof of product. But we wanted to basically have you thinking about what kinds of milestones are really relevant for developing a project. And I think that's something, that would be really important here. And one of the ways that we had been doing things is we had multiple tranches of funding that be coming out. So when there's a go no go criteria, it really is, if you have not met this milestone, we are not releasing a next tranche of funding, which I'm not certain that immediately applies to the way that this funding mechanism works, but is still a really relevant thing to be thinking about, because as you commercialize this product and go on to further scopes of money after this, investors are going to have very tight milestones. They're going to have very specific things that you need to accomplish before they're willing to, let you have more funding or to develop further kinds of activities. And so thinking about really, really specific quantifiable things that you can accomplish is really important, and how you measure those accomplishments. So, Teddy's making a great point. Do people want your product? That's, I think, a really important question before you develop it, because it turns out time is even more valuable than money, and you don't want to waste your time. But then the next question is, how do you show that there's proof of a market, or that people want this? What does your customer discovery look like? Say you're going to, go talk to 5 or 6 hospitals. What kind of feedback would you need in order to know that this is a product that's really going to work? Or what kind of further product design might be necessary in order for people to use this as a product? So it's kind of like, starting at a larger kind of, what is my product? Do people need it? And then start to ask, how do we know people need it?
Thank you. That's both really helpful. And I want to say, and I think I maybe should have said this at the beginning, like down here, we have some of these definitions that kind of align with what Teddy and Matthew were just saying. And also just know that part of what we're here for is to help you figure this out. We want to see with your application that you are thinking about these things. We will go through a lot of revisions, should you be awarded, to work through some of these, like the details of these activities. Like this whole, like you might have an idea that an activity takes a couple months. You might have an idea of what it costs, but this doesn't have to be, you could even like just kind of leave that blank. You might have an idea, you need one resource. We just want to see that you're thinking through these different areas. And like Matthew said, you may have 2 or 3 milestones that are all living kind of all like this, all just like market opportunity, another for IP regulatory. Again, this is just conceptual, and this is just like a way that we are able to see the details that you're thinking through. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot of information. And again, we'll have office hours tomorrow where Matthew and I will be available as well if you need to think things through. Hey, Cindy, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for this presentation. This is a whole new world for us. So could I just ask, what would a no-go gate, like how would that be phrased? If you could just, if I could hear an example, I think that might help me conceptualize what that's supposed to look like.
Sure. I'll back up.
No, go ahead, Matthew. That would be great to hear from you.
All right, so I've worked with about 20 different teams through my time at WeReach, and go no go gates, they take a lot of time to really put together. And I think this is an iterative process of what you think would be needed as a success criteria, having an external review board, having your reach team, having a bunch of people look at your project and really decide this is an evaluation that we think would really be important. So I'll give an example. Say, we had a diagnostic device for COVID. We had a couple of those come through. And they needed to have a certain level of specificity or a specific like sensitivity. Otherwise, it's not going to be competitive as a product or something. So, they needed 95% sensitivity and specificity. And if they couldn't reach that, they just weren't going to be competitive as a project. So one of the go gates is we need to be that sensitive and that specific. And if we can't achieve that, it doesn't really make sense to keep developing the product.
I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
And I'll add to that too. Part of this whole, project or this exercise is to help people transition from, I would say, like a translational research mindset to a product development mindset, which is to say, when I came to academia from industry, I asked somebody, I said, hey, we get all these grants and there's all this money. We're supposed to do this stuff that we said we do. What happens if we don't do it all? And they said, well, if you do most of it, that's like really the best anybody could have ever expected. And, then you just apply for more money to continue on the work, recognizing that there were some shortfalls. And I stepped back and I was like, wow, like you get fired in industry, you don't produce, like you're done, right? And so part of this exercise is to transition you from the, hey, we got 60% of the way there to, no, we got 90% of the way there. And even with a critical failure, like we thought this one thing was going to work, the null result is incredibly powerful here because it means you don't need to spend any more money on that part and you've pivoted to start spending money on something else. So these milestones are really designed for you to find points at which somebody's going to look at you and your project and they're going to say, that's a good idea. Let's keep funding it. Let's give more money. Or that's a bad idea because you're doing it this way, but it would be a great idea if you did it this other way. Concept's still great, science is still great. Maybe there's a different application. We'll put money into this other thing because you've proven that that one application doesn't work, but maybe there's another application that would work great. And so trying to get you to this place where when you're going to put all your work on the line and you're going to say, okay, judge me. As Matthew was saying, did you hit 95 or not? That's real simple. Did you hit 95 or not? And so getting you to the place where there are just hard lines. And if you hit it, then somebody says, yeah, that's great. I don't care how ugly it is. I don't care how expensive all the reagents and the prototypes are. That doesn't matter. We believe that you can make that simpler, cleaner, cheaper, but you've shown that the concept will eventually get there. And that's kind of what these gates and milestones are.
Very good. Thank you so much.
And I would also say, as you're developing these, like, a piece of showing that you're really competitive or relevant as a team is understanding and coming to an understanding of what is relevant for your go no go criteria. If you really only needed to hit 80% and you said you needed 95, that's a problem. And it's also a problem if you think that 60 was going to be okay, and then you talk to your customers or something, and they're like, that this isn't at least 80, there's no business in this kind of thing. So understanding a go no go criteria that really fits your product is also just a really important piece of moving into this kind of product development space.
Which can be part of this market sizing too. Like a really powerful result would be we went in thinking that 80 was okay. We talked to all these people and they said 60 was okay. That's a huge, really impactful finding, right? And it's arguably, it's not like bench science, but it's really impactful. Or if you went in thinking 80 was okay and it turns out 95, then you might step back and say, whoa, can we still do this? Or no, we can't do this. Again, that customer discovery, just talking to people and asking, really impactful in, might call it market sizing and all that sort of stuff, but it's really impactful in terms of knowing if you have something that you should pursue, that it's worth your time to continue.
Yeah, I would say that all of this is equally as important. Like all of these various stages, like having a later stage technology, like isn't ever going to happen if this isn't explored fully. And so what seems like maybe a less tangible question can be just as important to the development of your technology and getting it to market. I have a question in chat. From Andy. How speculative can we be about market versus should we plan in some data capture? I mean, we'll defer to what you guys would see from investment standpoints. I would say look for data capture. I mean, do you want to speak to that, Teddy and Matthew, a bit from your background?
I think the best thing you can do is I'm going to figure out like is what you want known unknowns. Yeah, that's what I mean. If you can just block out, we don't know this, we don't know this, we don't know this, we don't know this, then it makes it possible to kind of create that as like a shopping list. Okay, how am I going to get that information? Is it a report? Reports are expensive. Is there somebody who knows the answer already? And so you can have either money applied to the items on your shopping list, or you can have time applied. I'm going to send somebody off and they're going to research this. Do you know what I mean? So I just think creating that list of things that you don't know is not only really powerful, it also establishes credibility. People want to know that you can break down like an impossible problem into just here's a bunch of stuff we don't know. Okay, we're just going to go after it step by step, step by step. And that is great for credibility. Nobody expects you to just have it solved because if you did, then like you'd be on the market already. But just having the steps is really helpful.
Yeah, and realistically, like let's say maybe you have something like defined for data capture and you get feedback from a technology guidance committee from the NIH or from our external review board that says, actually, I think this would be a more efficient activity to reach this milestone. You can incorporate that feedback. We don't expect you to have all the answers or expertise because we understand this is quite new to many people. I mean, any other questions maybe about this relevant to this first section, or any additional comments you want to make, Teddy or Matthew, before we move down?
I just have one comment, which is the other reason why we've got like this language of things that you could be thinking of as milestones is that in basic research, you're basically, does this thing work? I have a hypothesis I want to test, science is kind of like this highlight, but when you start making a product, other concerns start being important. So are you able to get IP on this? Do other people have IP that's relevant to this? Are they going to try and block you? Is it based upon other people's technology? Does it look similar enough? Because if you can't get IP, then that's going to be a problem. Do you have a regulatory plan? Do you know who you need to talk to in the FDA? Do you know what kind of submission is necessary? You can have a class 2 device, a class 3 device. How much money is it going to cost to do these things? And these are pieces that are really, really important for commercialization that might not be as immediately visible if this is a basic science question.
Thanks so much, Matthew. That's a great point. All right. So some of you will also likely be kind of living in this stage of your technology development, at least from what I've seen from the letters of interest. And this is about demonstrating proof of product concept. So, I mean, I guess in general, what I think of when I think of product concept is you have a product versus a technology. So you have this technology, but what does it look like when you're actually pursuing it and trying to turn it into an actual physical product that you're getting to market? So Teddy, do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to think about this. It might be, like if it's an electronics thing, quite often, when electrical engineers are making stuff, it's just a whole bunch of wires on a breadboard and it like covers the whole tabletop. And clearly that's not a product. And it's not necessarily to say that you need to have printed circuits which replicate that to have proof of product concept. But it is to say that maybe you could find a similar product on the market that has a similar aspect of functionality. And in that, they have demonstrated that they were able to take what is your, mass of wires and reduce it into some sort of circuit or chip, right? In some way, demonstrate that it's possible to take what is currently your bench prototype or assembly and make it into something smaller, or just go ahead and do it, right? Like, I mean, sometimes that costs more money. It might cost 100 or $150,000 to get some medical devices prototyped. But then on the therapeutic side, it might be to say, hey, uh, can you, is there an assay for this? You know, a lot of people will say, hey, no, we're going to do this thing and we're going to test this. It's going to be this amazing diagnostic. It's like, okay, show me the assay. Like, do you have an assay that does that? Or are you just saying, like, theoretically, you're going to get to some assay that does that? And just having an assay, which might not even have such a very clean data set as a result, but you've got the chemistry mostly there, um, I would say that's also a really strong step directionally to show that you're going to get there. You know, from zero to a little bit is a huge step, even if it's not fully refined or cleaned up.
Thanks, Jenny. Matthew, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I normally think of this as like, product design pieces of an application. So, we have, we're making a certain kind of medical tape or something, and we need to show that we can scale it up, or we need to show that it, we can need to make it with X, Y, and Z property, or um, I've seen a lot of therapeutics projects come through is, oh, we need to do a rat study, or oh, we need to do like, a mouse study or something. So here's our design of how that study is going to look at, and here's how things have been de-risked. I mean, the reality as well is that different amounts of money are needed for different kinds of projects. And, think about also this is probably about a $50,000 opportunity. And if you've got a therapeutic or something, like what can you do to de-risk your product? What can you do to show that it's going to work at this kind of scale? Maybe it is a mouse model, maybe it is like a certain kind of in vitro assay or something, like, thinking about what that's going to be needed for, and also just given these kind of scopes of money, starting to also think, which is getting into milestone three pieces, but you need to think about it, is how much money and funding and activities do you really need to do for your whole project? And think of this as like, you know, Reach is basically kind of a gap fund of a sort of giving you the opportunity to work on some pieces, de-risk some pieces, show some promise so that you can show a next set of funders that it's worth investing in you.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Matthew. So again, like we really invite you to use this as a tool to just think through, like it's going to evolve and change. But yeah, we understand $50,000 isn't going to get you maybe to the spin out stage, but it's really good to think kind of backwards planning, right? Like what do you want the end result to be, and go from there. And part of what Reach does and Rocky Mountain Reach will do is, if your application is accepted, we hope to help you locate those other funding resources. And again, that's, and between our funding and hopefully follow-on funding, help kind of create more of a commercial opportunity for our applicants and just people in our region, that we're all existing in a pretty rural ecosystem. Yeah. Any other comments or questions right now? Okay, awesome. Thanks,
I do
everyone.
have a comment on that, just on
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
price points of things.
Yeah.
I encourage people to remember, the days of being an undergrad where you don't have any money at all, right? Like, can you get this done for free? Like, free is actually always the best price. And so sometimes it might be, gosh, I still want to do this. I haven't figured it out yet, but I would love for universities to figure out how to do an equipment sharing. Does somebody in some lab somewhere have the $100,000 piece of equipment that you need? But because you don't have it, you're going to have to go to some CRO that's going to charge you $50,000 or $100,000 to do this study. I know somebody on your campus has the equipment you need. I know it. Anyway, this is just one of my own little agendas, right? Like, how am I going to get people to share equipment? But it might be, can you like ask around, right? So if you just list things on here, what you need to do, then make it a separate project to figure out how you're going to get the money or get it done or who's going to do it. And of course, in here, you need to list who you think is going to do it, but there's always that, like, you might stumble upon some piece of equipment that's being utilized like 7% of the year, or it was used once 5 years ago. Anyway, this is clearly a hot button for me, as you can tell. Can it be done for free, right? Can you get free?
Yeah, and that's part of like what my role within Reach is going to be, is to be like, let me help you within your institutions and within our region to kind of find some of those resources, like especially because we're lucky enough at University of Montana to have R1 status. So we have some of this capital equipment and part of our leadership team that we could lend to you, but just seeing you list it will help me like work with you to identify some of those resources that you probably haven't had capacity to think about or to locate yourselves. Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
I'm wondering here, Caroline, kind of what you're describing in terms of like what types of equipment you need. And I'm wondering, you know, in these lines.
Oh, you get muted.
Oh, you got muted, Cindy, sorry.
Oh, no worries. There we go. I'm wondering how much text you're looking for in here. It sounds like maybe you're looking for these to be fleshed out maybe a little bit more than the one liner kind of suggests. Is that true?
I wouldn't say in here. I mean, if the application is successful, that's when we'll work more one-on-one to flesh those out a bit more. Like we have some sample milestones on the second tab of this that I think are pretty representative. And you'll explain in your application some as well. What's your experience, Matthew? I mean, kind of working directly with technologies.
My experience is that you have like a big idea of what you want your milestone to be, and then you start filling out the activities that are going to help you reach it, and then you basically start looking at like, okay, those are the activities I need. Are those the right activities? Are those in the right order? You know, what's the waterfall of how these are going to go? Can some of these be done parallel? Do some of them have to be done like in a waterfall or like sequentially? And then based upon some of those activities, you go back to your milestone and then start to really, really hone in on it. So I kind of think of it as your general thing. Honestly, like Rodney will kill me on this one. You start with the aim. What is the thing you want to do? And then you go with the sub activities of how you do it. And then you go back to that. And then you start making it into a milestone of how do I know I achieved this aim? And then you rewrite that aim into a milestone that says, I will know I achieved this if I can hit X, Y, and Z. And what's good about having, Reach, what's good about having your external reviewers, what's good about having your whole team is that then they can basically say, that's a good way to quantify this, or actually you might want to tweak it like this. It needs more specificity here, or I want to see more about how you're going to do your regulatory strategy there, or some more back and forth. So it really is get as specific as you can in your application, and the reason why you want to be as specific as possible. So there's the carrot and the stick. I mean, the stick is if you get very specific and you don't meet the thing, then you have some problems. But if you get really specific with us as well, the carrot is that you can get higher quality feedback of what you really need to do for your quantification. So it's not like a punishment mechanism. It's no, these are the things that you really need. And there's like a real kindness to basically saying that if you can't hit these, or if investors aren't going to be interested in this, don't keep developing something you don't need to develop for yourself up for something else or another way to make the impact you want to make, because I think the impact is what matters.
Yeah, you may have you could add a bunch of activities here. It's kind of how much feedback would be the most helpful for you. But I kind of tend to agree with Matthew, like more is better because it gives us more to work with.
Yeah.
With the caveat of clarity, like don't write like a novel or something, or like a long paragraph. Write what you think is needed to communicate this, because think about it like this: is the easier your reviewers have a time reading your application, the easier it'll be for them to engage with it and provide feedback that's really going to be helpful. And I have seen on countless projects, the feedback really, really matters, because then people who have more experience in commercialization or just different experience can kind of fill in the gaps of the unknown unknowns of the things you didn't even know you needed to be worrying about.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really helpful too, because as you lay out what you plan to do, you're also revealing kind of your level of experience with this process. And the reviewers, well, I mean, I know for me at least, like I give completely different advice to different people. If it's somebody who's just getting started, I'm going to give some actionable advice that's not going to be overwhelming, but they'll be able to make progress. If it's somebody who's clearly done this many, many times before, my advice is going to be incredibly granular and detail oriented and specific to things that it might make the head spin of somebody who's never done this before. And so by laying out your plan, you're also kind of indicating what type of feedback would be helpful for you going forward.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that.
There's not too, well, I guess you could do it completely wrong, but as long as we can see that you're thinking through kind of what we're talking about, I mean, we'll just, the point is, yeah, for it to be a tool for you, for us to be able to provide feedback that's not going to be wrong or like necessarily, unless you just completely don't address any of what we're discussing. We kind of, again, we included this last section in here. I don't think many of you will, or any of you for this application cycle for this pilot award funding will be here. But again, this is the section that's really focused on spin out and licensing. And oftentimes this may overlap with some of your milestones or milestone that in B, some of the activities may overlap. So we wanted to, I felt like it was important to include it on the Gantt chart just for you to have and for you to think through maybe in the future. But again, it's about, we like to see when a team has a comprehensive plan, even if we can't fund everything now, we feel that it's a good tool for you to have to think through. Do you have any other kind of comments? I feel like I keep reiterating that, but just that this is, we want this process, this feedback to be helpful for you and for you to just think conceptually through some of these later stages here.
Can also be aspirational,
Yeah.
right? For some things, it's going to say, hey, we're going to form a company and we're going to need an SBIR grant. For others, it might be, wow, this is very clearly a partnership. We are making, a fundamental piece of a much bigger technology. And so maybe in this C section, you would have we're going to be looking at companies that are working in this arena that might be interested in acquiring this technology. Whereas for other things, it might be, we're going to start talking to angel investors who we think might help us take us to the next step where we can really build out some of these prototypes or get us to that next round of funding where we can develop a device. But different things are going to go different directions. And in some ways, this is an encouragement for you to think about, gosh, what is the right path for whatever it is that you're developing?
I would also say is that, this is a roadmap for what your larger project is going to look like. This is not just reach. This is, you got a product, you want to get this thing to market. Really, what's going to be needed? What other kinds of funding are going to be needed? What other expertise do you need to add to your team? What are you thinking about this? Do you want this to be a company? Do you want this to be a product that you license to another company? How are you thinking about those pieces? And the reality is, it's never too early to just have some sort of consideration on this. So in WeReach, a lot of projects would have like a required activity, maybe not like it was not milestone level, but like a required activity of applying for some kind of other follow-on funding, applying for an SBIR, applying for an STTR, going to work with, say, some sort of incubator, going to work on just other ways of thinking about next steps and having that built into your project earlier, because what you don't want to have happen is you get 50,000 or even you get 100,000 from this mechanism, and you're doing a lot of great development and you don't have a plan for what comes next. And so everything kind of has to sit while you apply for a bunch of things without any resources or funding to do that, putting a lot of time on it. And then maybe it takes you 6, 7, 8 months to get a next funding source.
That's a great point, Matthew.
I also like to go fast. So if I know ultimately I'm going to want, one group or another to acquire a technology, I'll start talking to them now because it takes a couple years of them knowing you and following your work for them to be ready to make that acquisition. So if you know that's where you're going, I literally would start C at the same time I was starting A. I might start sending in some papers. I might say, "Hey, come visit the lab. Hey, let me talk to you about this sort of thing." Get your innovation manager involved and just start developing that relationship because the acquirer needs time with you um, to follow what you're doing. And by the time you've checked all these boxes, they're going to say, "Okay, we're ready." And that's the fastest way to do it. I know in academia people don't necessarily go fast, but I like to go as fast as I can. It's just the way I roll.
Yeah, like that relationship, like you may, again, that's an activity, like that's an important activity. Again, it's not as tangible, but and you may not include it for this application, but if you're awarded and we're talking through things, that will be something that we would want to talk about too, like because we want to see these products move beyond reach. That's the point. And we have great people like Teddy and Matthew that are like REACH. I guess I don't know if we've explained this. So REACH is based in Seattle and they are closely partnering with Rocky Mountain Reach. So we have access to them as resources. That's why they are here. Yeah.
Something else that I would consider just while you're filling this out, you don't have to be completely like, granular down to the detail entirely on the budgets, but budgets think of it as like your set of priorities. If you're putting like 50% of your budget on, I don't know, buying a specific machine or something, you're telling me it's a very big priority for your project versus, a certain amount of like, graduate student time or a research scientist time on something. So, really you're showing what you think are the values and the important pieces and how much you think things cost. And also there's a certain de-risking of, say you think that this piece of equipment should cost 15,000 and it turns out actually you need more functionality. It costs more like 25,000, or you think you need like 20 hours of your scientist time and it turns out you might need 45 or 50 hours. Like those are useful things to be considering. And so putting down, in your budget what you think these things should be costing, it's another place for you to get feedback of, yeah, that seems like a reasonable amount for that thing to cost, or no, 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 it shouldn't be costing that, or you think that the value is going to be at this set of activities, but really you want to be splurging your budget pieces somewhere else, which is like, to Teddy's point about the things that you can do for free. um, figure out where the money is best used, because that's, your resources are basically money and time.
Yeah, you're going to write your budget template and your budget narrative at the same time. And it may be that in review, again, that those things change, not because we're like, we think that cost is wrong, but maybe that we're like, yeah, maybe think towards spending that money elsewhere because we actually have a resource that we could think you could leverage. But yeah, it is. I'm a budget person, so it's important to think through that as well, but be aspirational also.
So I'm seeing there in the milestones for C that some of those, I'm thinking kind of along the lines of what Teddy's talking about there, about maybe forming some relationships and starting to kind of, investigate some, partnerships with, potential organizations that we think might be interested in, having the product licensed out to them. Some of those seem like the cost estimate will be just free. I mean, it's not free, right? It's investigator time, but probably on here, they'll kind of show up that way.
Yeah, that's completely reasonable.
I mean, a lot of really critical customer discovery is you get in a car and you drive to the people you want to talk to and you make sure you have questions to ask and you get your feedback or something. The biggest cost of that is time and, maybe figuring out good questions to ask so that you get the kind of feedback that you really need. But, a lot of it is stuff that, you know, it's not necessarily immediately shows up as a budget item, but you know, maybe you drive to the person who says, I absolutely don't want this. Why on earth would you need this? This is nonsense, versus, I didn't think about that. What about this indication? You know, like, you know, you think you're doing a diabetes indication, that's extremely useful. But like, my patients with diabetes also have this other, you know, cross-sectioned health problem that if you could build more into that, that would be so important for us. Yeah. I mean, the lab I also work at, we do a lot of HIV work, and it turns out there's a lot of people with HIV that also have problems with hepatitis B. And so, you know, it turns out that, you know, if you're not also addressing hepatitis, it doesn't matter that you have a fairly good HIV therapy.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to jump back in, sorry I was a little late, but on the section C, kind of Caroline has mentioned this a little bit, but just to reiterate that that section can also give us at Rocky Mountain Reach an idea of, like, throughout your grant process, thinking of people that we're meeting along the way, because we're still out networking and you know, building our connections, like, oh, you know, Cindy, at the end of your project, you want to approach this type of investor, like, we can, if we know that in advance, then we can be thinking about that along the grant period for you as well, and also thinking about different trainings and, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, it can honestly almost be like a wish list of, these are the people or the businesses or, you know, the resources that I will need at the end of this funding, and so we can take that information and try to help you make those connections as well. So just another way to think of some of the later stage milestones.
Thanks, Leidy.
Mhm.
We have about 10 minutes left. Does anyone have anything else Teddy or Matthew, about, you want to kind of mention about this template, or does anyone have any questions? Just to reiterate, I can talk today. We do have open office hours at noon tomorrow. If anyone wants to drop in, Matthew will be there. But also anytime you can email as well. Email me and I can assist you or get in touch with someone who can as well. Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining and sharing your time and technologies with us. And thank you, Betty and Matthew, so much for assisting us with this process. And our next workshop, Lady, is it next week or is it 2 weeks from now? I couldn't remember.
It is next week.
Mhm.
It is on Wednesday at noon again, and I'll send out the registration link again, probably tomorrow, or we might send it with the wrap up from this meeting. Yeah, but we hope to see you all next week.
Yeah, and hope all of your semesters wrapped up cleanly or are wrapping up. Yeah. Happy summer. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Happy to
Thank
help.
you.